1967. Parnelli Jones dominates the race in Andy Granatelli's revolutionary and controversial STP turbine car, the Dayglow Red number 40. Just as victory seems certain, a bearing breaks. The STP team settles for 6th place, and Parnelli Jones steps out of his car for the last time as a driver at Indy. Hello, I'm Paul Page. It was a brief but spectacular career filled with success, controversy, and disappointment. From his much-anticipated debut in 1961 to that dramatic finish in 1967, Parnelli Jones was always a dominating force. Although he won the race only once, Parnelli left his mark. He earned his place in history at the Indy 500, a race for heroes. Parnelli Jones began racing as a teen in California. He started out helping a cousin who needed mechanical assistance with his stock car. Soon, Rufus Jones was racing, taking turns behind the wheel of a car he bought with the help of a friend. At the time, he was not old enough to race legally.
Well, actually, my first name's Rufus, but my middle name is Parnell. And this Billy Calder, when we were running the old jalopy, because I was so young, he had to make a phony identification for me, and he used to call me Parnelli all the time. And I didn't particularly like it, but he was also a very good artist, and he also lettered the car, and he put Parnelli on the car, so that's kind of how that all started.
By 1956, Parnelli Jones was drawing some attention. Val Miletich recognized the potential and provided a ride for the rapidly improving youngster. It was a winning combination. Finally, in 1960, Parnelli made his first appearance at the legendary Oval in Indianapolis. He had come as a spectator, but many of the car owners were aware of his talent. Offers were made. Parnelli politely refused. 1 week after Indianapolis, Parnelli accepted a ride and made the show in Milwaukee. Later, he joined USAC and stormed to the 1960 Midwest Sprint Car title. The next step was inevitable. Parnelli Jones would drive at Indy in 1961. This time around, the offers were solid. On the suggestion of driver Tony Bettenhausen, car owner J.C. Agajanian approached the highly regarded rookie with a solid ride, a 1-year-old Watson Roadster, driven the year before by Lloyd Ruby. Parnelli accepted the offer and put the car they called Calhoun in the middle of the second row next to the 1959 winner, Roger Ward.
I felt like that he was going to be a driver to deal with. I didn't know him all that well personally. The only time that I ever remember meeting him was at a stock car race in Phoenix, Arizona, where I put him upside down by accident.
On race day, Parnelli was considered a serious threat to win. And when the green flag went down, car number 98 was in the hunt. Parnelli Jones was running with the leaders. And when defending winner Jim Rathman in car number 4 made his first pit stop of the day, the lead went to Parnelli. Unfortunately, the hard-charging rookie ran into some problems.
One of the lap cars, I picked up a Seuss fastener, a piece of metal or something, hit me right in the eyebrow. And it was bleeding really bad. I mean, it just started filling my goggles full of this, just one eye, not the other eye, but it just started filling this up full of blood. And I'd empty it out like this, and then I'd blink my eye a couple of times, and I could see out of it. I did that 2 or 3 times, and finally it kind of dried up. Later on in the race, as I was leading, and finally the engine lost a cylinder and started running on 3 cylinders. And finally down to 2, and it got bad. It just kept getting worse. They wanted me to keep running because I had an opportunity to become Rookie of the Year, and which I was voted co-Rookie of the Year with Bobby Marshman.
When 1962 rolled around, the Speedway had a new look. The traditional bricks of the main straight were gone. With a newly paved asphalt surface, the track would not only be smoother, but faster as well. This year, the magic 150-mile-an-hour barrier was in jeopardy. With another full year of racing and more than 2,000 miles of tire testing behind him, Parnelli Jones was ready for the challenge. In qualifications, several drivers closed in on the mark. Roger Ward, A.J. Foyt, Len Sutton, and Shorty Templeman all hit 149. But Parnelli had the edge, officially becoming the first man to qualify at more than 150 miles per hour.
You know, that was the magic goal that everybody was going for. And of course, all during the month of May, we never run 150. It was we always run 149 pretty consistently. And then the morning of qualification, you know, I don't know what it is, but we ran like 151 miles an hour.
Start your engines!
On race day, Calhoun was clearly the fastest car on the track, leading 120 of the first 125 laps. But there were problems. Roger Ward was slowly cutting into Parnelli's lead, and on lap 125, it became obvious that Parnelli was leading the race without any brakes.
I knew as I began to gain on him that he obviously had some kind of problem. Now, I didn't know exactly what it was at that time. But then when I could finally see him, I knew that he had a problem with the brakes because he was driving very cautiously, and he was backing off a little earlier than he would under normal conditions. And so I realized that if I passed him, I had to be very careful.
I was long gone, and all of a sudden, somebody spun or something in turn 2, and I backed off and hit the brakes, and the pedal went clear of the floor. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? I mean, you know, here I had a tremendous lead, and everything was just going great, and, you know, suddenly you lose the brakes. I mean, it just feels like you're just not meant to be for you.
He did manage to finish the race, carefully maneuvering number 98 to 7th place. Many would have been happy to finish, but to this day, Parnelli says he should have won it. '63 brought a taste of Europe and a lot of talk about Colin Chapman's rear-engine Lotus machines. The fans said that they were funny cars because of their appearance. The dyed-in-the-wool fans said that the rear-engine cars were for drivers who like to be pushed around. Andy Granatelli's revitalized Novi also caught the attention of many. But as the practice began, the focus turned to Parnelli Jones and his reliable 4-year-old car number 98. With another summer of tire testing behind him, Parnelli was confident that he was the man to beat. When qualifications were over, 4 more drivers had broken the 150-mile-an-hour barrier, and Parnelli was firmly on the pole with a new 1- and 4-lap record. He was clearly the favorite. As the race began, second fastest qualifier, Jim Hurtubise, in car number 56, dropped back, and Parnelli was in the lead going into turn 1. But before the first lap was complete, Hurtubise had raced his supercharged Novi into the lead.
When he came by me at the end of the back straightaway on the first lap, I mean, I was totally shocked because, as you remember, when his car jumped out of gear, he just disappeared backwards, and I figured, oh, gee, something happened to poor Jim. And I mean, I had no idea. And when I heard that noise at the end of the back straightaway, I know it was the Novi.
The lead changed several times those first 2 laps. But Parnelli finally pulled away. He was solidly in the lead. Still ahead on lap 63, Jones pulled in for his first pit stop, handing the lead to Jim Clark in the Lotus, car number 92. For Parnelli, timing in the pits would be especially important. He would have to stop at least 3 times during the race, while the Lotus cars were planning to run the full 500 miles on only 1 stop. Quickly, Parnelli was back on the track, but he couldn't catch Jim Clark. The European champion held on to the lead until pitting on lap 95. With Clark in for a long stop, Parnelli built his lead to 40 seconds, but he would have to pit twice more. Clark would not have to stop at all. Slowly, the Lotus climbed back into contention. By the 3/4 mark, Clark pulled to within 3 seconds of Parnelli and the lead. But then he started to drop back. Parnelli was losing oil.
Toward the end of the race, my oil tank broke. And when it broke, I mean, I almost spun the car. I don't know how many laps there was left to go, 10 or 15 laps to go. and the car just literally got sideways, and I couldn't get after it at all because what happened, the tank being on the left side, all the oil was pouring off on the left rear tire. But where the tank broke, it was broke right above the center of the tank. And as soon as that oil level dropped reasonably below that point, it quit dumping the oil out of there. But there for a couple of laps, it was really quite scary.
The black flag to bring him in was considered, but never thrown, as Parnelli's problem subsided.
It's true that Parnelli did lose some oil. But when a guy is leading the race, you better be damn sure that you're right if you're going to throw the black flag at him.
On lap 182, Eddie Sachs spins, but regains control, and the controversy brewed as Parnelli continued to lead.
A little pool of oil about that big around came out of the front of the car and sat in the ground. Mr. Clint Browner went to the USAC, or whatever it was then, and said we were leaking oil, and they disqualified us. They flagged us in. They flagged us in and disqualified us for leaking oil, and we were not leaking oil. It was Parnelli Jones who was leaking the oil, who went on to win the race. It was a spray of oil coming out of Parnelli's car that you could flog, mister.
Next to the last lap, I run like 149, 150 miles an hour, so pretty obvious it wasn't oily or hurting my car or anything like that. They made a big to-do about it. You can't add oil in your car during the race. There was other cars completely out of oil, included Hurtubise Novi, and also Dempsey Wilson's car run completely out of oil during that race. The track was oily, kind of oily toward the last half of the race anyhow. And everybody seemed to want to blame it on me.
With 2 laps to go, Parnelli is still in the lead and preparing to pass number 14, Roger McCluskey. McCluskey spins, but Parnelli passes without trouble and cruises home to a 30-second victory over Jim Clark, averaging a record 143 miles an hour. For Parnelli, it was a dream come true, but others weren't taking it so well. Eddie Sachs thought Parnelli should have been flagged.
He came up and congratulated me for winning and everything, but he says they should have black flagged him. And I says, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, you dumped all the oil. And I said, well, I wasn't the only car that dumped all the oil out there, Eddie. He said, I spun in your oil. And I said, no, you didn't. So we got in a little bit of an argument. And I said, that's just not true. And he says, I said, you're a liar. And he says, you're a liar. And so that started the whole thing. So I said, sorry to bust you in the mouth. And he said, well, go ahead. And I did. So that, and then the cute thing he did is he ran up in the hotel room. He was staying at the same hotel, and he ran up to the hotel room and got a little black flag and stuck it in his mouth. And, of course, the press picked that up right away, and that was in the paper the next day.
Despite the record-setting 1963 performance of Parnelli Jones in a front-engine roadster, many drivers were considering the rear-engine cars in 1964. Parnelli practiced in both, choosing to stay with the reliable Calhoun, slightly modified, and now 5 years old. Driving the old number 98 Roadster, Parnelli qualified 4th fastest, putting him on the inside of the second row. Early in the race, number 6, Jim Clark, and number 51, Bobby Marshman, dominated in Lotus rear-engine cars, but both fell out, setting up another 2-car duel between A.J. Foyt and Parnelli. On lap 55, Parnelli was leading when he came in for a routine pit stop that ended in disaster.
They used to put a asbestos cover over the top of the exhaust so that if it did leak any fuel, that it wouldn't ignite on the exhaust pipe. And of course, that's what happened. I think somebody pulled that cover off too soon, ignited the fuel, and just before they closed the lid on it. And when they closed the lid on it, the fire was already inside the fuel tank, and when they closed the lid, it just blew the tank up.
The defending champion was out for the day, suffering minor burns. When Calhoun finally retired, Parnelli settled into a rear-engine Lotus for 1965, but kept the familiar number 98. He qualified 5th fastest, then wrecked in practice. The car was seriously damaged, and Parnelli was dazed, but unhurt. By race day, the car was ready to go. It wasn't in top form, but Parnelli was. Parnelli milked his Lotus to second place, took the checkered flag, and promptly ran out of gas. He was towed back to the pits. 1966. Starting from the inside of the second row, Parnelli avoided disaster on the opening lap. After the restart, he managed to run as high as second place before dropping out with a broken wheel bearing on lap 87. It was the third straight year of disappointment for Parnelli, but racing was becoming less important for the 1963 winner. With business interests taking more and more time, Parnelli was considering a cutback in his racing career. In 1967, a new car was unveiled with proven dependability of a turbine engine and the superior handling of four-wheel drive. Andy Granatelli's new creation was innovative, revolutionary, and controversial.
Parnelli Jones says he would not drive the car unless he had a lock on the race. And I took him to Phoenix to drive the car, and he drove the car at Phoenix, and of course, he had that special smile he gets on his face. And then after he drove the car at Phoenix, and he says, obviously, I'll drive it in Indianapolis. But probably he had hung up his helmet, and he wasn't going back to this anymore. I mean, he hadn't planned to go back. But the turbine car, effectively brought him out of retirement.
We were doing a test in early '66. And I said, well, bring the car over there and I'll take a ride in it. So he brought it to Phoenix, and I, of course, was doing tests in my own car. And I took a ride in it, and it kind of impressed me. And so I jumped on it real hard, going out of the pits, trying to brake it. It didn't brake, so I thought, you know, this might be something that was really getting more and more into me. So, and the more interested I got into, the more involved we got. The more I run, the faster I ran, and I began to like it.
The STP car number 40 was drawing plenty of attention. Many drivers were critical.
Basically, I felt that piston engine-powered cars were curtailed and hemmed in by the rules to a very exacting amount. And what right did a turbine car, which is taking a turbine off of the shelf somewhere, which has hundreds or thousands of hours of maintenance-free power available to it, and put it in there and have it be faster than these very restricted piston engine cars? I felt if they're going to run engines like that, they ought to at least make them have to hop them up so that they're sort of on the edge the way all the piston engine cars had to be. Plus, I didn't like the idea that the thing sounded like a vacuum cleaner anyway, or had no sound at all. And to me, the sounds of racing were and remain very important.
In qualifications, the car was adequate, but not spectacular. With the sixth fastest time, Parnelli would start on the outside of the second row, his worst starting position in 7 years at Indianapolis.
It would just come storming out of the corner like it was just going to set the world on fire, and then it would just kind of fall on its face down at the end of the straightaway. This allowed the other drivers out there during practice to drive by me. In other words, I'd pull them coming off the corner, and then down at the end of the straightaway, they'd drive back by me. And they assumed that I was sandbagging, that I was backing off the throttle, and which I wasn't.
I know that they were sandbagging, that he had so much more that he must have been embarrassed by it, but so it was not even a contest. I didn't say that Parnelli couldn't win it with a regular car, because he's already done that, but I wasn't very, I didn't like the whole shebang.
When the race started, Parnelli ran high and soon was in second place behind Mario Andretti. Approaching from the outside, Jones prepared to pass, but Mario came up high, and Parnelli ducked inside, wheeling the superbly handling turbine car into the lead. By the end of the first lap, he had run away from the pack. This year's race was to be a two-day event. Rain stopped the contest after only 18 laps, and the race would resume from that point on the next day. After the restart, Parnelli was lapping the slower cars and building his lead. No one could catch him. The turbine car was unbeatable if it could make the distance and if Parnelli could avoid disaster. Lap 52. Heading into turn 4, Parnelli approaches Leroy Yarbrough in car number 67. Suddenly, Yarbrough spins. Parnelli hits the brakes and avoids potential trouble. Leading now at will, Parnelli was on his way to victory number 2. 4 laps to go when the crowd was stunned.
His crew running up after him. With just 4 laps to go, it'll be
I put a lap on everybody but AJ, and he was right in front of me, and I could have easily lapped him. And I just was driving it so easy. I mean, not even, you know, running the throttle up and down. I mean, to try to hurt it in any way. Just going down the back straightaway, all of a sudden it just like he took it out of gear, and that was it. It just was sickening.
After thoroughly dominating the field, a broken bearing dropped Parnelli Jones to 6th place. A.J. Foyt took the checkered flag, but the turbine had made its mark.
We got probably more out of it than Foyt went by winning. The car went on tour for all year. I made a lot of appearances with it. We got a lot of publicity out of it. One of the Johnny Carson show. Johnny Carson came to Indianapolis and drove the car, and turned out to be great.
With perhaps his most memorable race behind him, Parnelli Jones would not drive at the Speedway again. He was entered to race the turbine in 1968, but chose not to run. His business and family were growing, and Parnelli was ready to retire from championship racing as a driver. As a car owner, Parnelli would return with business partner Vel Miletich. Vel's Parnelli Jones Racing won at Indianapolis in 1970 and 71 with Al Unser driving. With Joe Leonard behind the wheel, they won 2 USAC national championships. And with Mario Andretti, they ventured briefly into European Grand Prix before dissolving the racing team in 1977. With his racing activities cut considerably, Parnelli then concentrated on running his business, built in part through his days as one of the best drivers ever to circle the track in Indianapolis.
You know, I feel like I'm one of the very fortunate race drivers that have won that race. And I think winning that race is probably gives you more stature, and it still opens doors for me even today.
I just love the man. I mean, he was certainly the greatest talent in the roadster that ever hit Indianapolis. He showed everybody the short way around the track.
Parnelli Jones ranks up there with the best, and anybody that says, nah, I don't think so, never saw him race.
Didn't make any difference who drove a car. If Parnelli got in it, it was going to go faster. And I always admired that. And I always thought that's neat to know that you can drive a race car faster than anybody else.
Hundreds of drivers have risked everything to run at the legendary Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Few have won, and fewer still have become legends. Parnelli Jones stands among the legends at the Indy 500, a race for heroes.